Welcome to a moment of meditation. I am Patricia Lee, the assistant chaplain here at the village. We have learned that in the Bible, God has many names. Most of them were revealed by God Himself to His people. God's names are signs of His character and attributes. Learning the names of God will allow us to know Him fuller and deeper. So we will continue to study some of the names of God. Let's first gather our thoughts by reciting together the first two verses of Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. We find four different names that refer to God. We have already looked into the general term God, which is Elohim in Hebrew. We are also familiar with God's personal divine name, the Lord, in all capital letters, a name that is never uttered by Jews, but if it is spelled out, it will be Yahweh in Hebrew or Jehovah in English. Last time, we meditated on His name, the Almighty. It is El Shaddai in Hebrew, expressing God's mighty power like the mountains, as well as His sufficiency in providing for His children like a mother's breast. The name we are going to meditate on today is God the Most High, as found in the first verse. In Hebrew, God the Most High is Elyon. Elyon literally means most high. It expresses this extreme sovereignty and majesty of God and His highest preeminence. When Elyon is combined with El, the compound name Elyon can be translated as God Most High or the Most Exalted God. The name first appeared in Genesis chapter 14. It was in the early days when Abram and his nephew Lot needed to decide where to settle, since they each had lots of flocks and herdsmen. Lot chose the fertile Jordan Valley and soon moved into the city of Sodom, where the people were wicked. Abram, on the other hand, yielded and settled in Canaan. A few years later, war broke out among the kings of the little nations in the valley. There were 4 kings against 5 kings, and the king of Sodom and Gomorrah, the 2 sin cities, were defeated. Let's find out what happened in Genesis chapter 4, starting from verse 11. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorites, brother of Eshcol and of Anna. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. And after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shiva, that is, the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, El Elyon. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, El Elyon in Hebrew, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, El Elyon, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. This is a pretty long and involved introduction to how this name of God, El Elyon, came to be known to us. Here we see Lot and all the people in his household and all his possessions were captured and brought away. But his uncle Abram came to his rescue with a band of his servants and brought everyone and everything back, including the king of Sodom. Now let's focus our attention on a mysterious character that appeared in verse 18. Here we read, "And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, El Elyon." This is a little bit we know from the words and history. Melchizedek in Hebrew means king of righteousness. It is likely to be his title rather than his personal name. He was the king of Salem. Salem means peace. It is the forerunner of the city of Jerusalem. This king was not involved with the war among the other 9 kings. Melchizedek was a king, but at the same time he was priest of God Most High, El Elyon. We are not told who anointed him to be a priest, but we are clearly told that he was priest of El Elyon. In verse 18, we read that Melchizedek offered Abram bread and wine to celebrate his victory, but also to refresh his soldiers after battle. Doesn't that gesture remind us of the Eucharist or Holy Communion, which we partake to be refreshed spiritually by Christ's body and blood that were sanctified for us? Then we also know that Melchizedek's blessing was with authority. In verse 19, he blessed Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. The Canaanites worshiped many pagan gods, but only the one true God, Elohim, is the one who rules and possesses heaven and earth. Then in verse 20, Melchizedek praised God and recognized that it is God Most High, El Elyon, who had delivered Abram's enemies into his hand. Now that's all we can find out of this priest of the Most High God from the book of Genesis. But centuries later, the Holy Spirit inspired King David to write in Psalm 110, the most prominent psalm concerning the promised Messiah from God, these words about the Messiah in verse 4. "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek." Now that's as puzzling as the priest Melchizedek himself. What was his order of priesthood? Well, God provides the answer of the puzzle for us in the New Testament book of Hebrews, which explains how Jesus Christ is the Messiah, the great high priest from God. We read in the last part of chapter 6, going into chapter 7 of Hebrews. Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf, having become a high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, is first by translation of his name, King of Righteousness. And then he is also king of Salem, that is, king of peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he continues a priest forever. We have spent quite a bit of time on Melchizedek, this mysterious priest of the Most High God, who only showed up in Genesis 14 to give God's blessings to Abram. But it turns out he was ordained by the supreme deity, El Elyon, to be a model of the promised Messiah, Jesus Christ himself. God Most High alone has a preeminence and power to design and carry out the plan of salvation for mankind by sending Jesus Christ the Messiah. And in his sovereign plan, he placed someone like Melchizedek, the priest of El Elyon, centuries before Christ, to be a model, a forerunner, so that we can understand that Christ is not only the king, but also the great high priest. As for this name of God, El Elyon, we see variations of the compound name, such as Yahweh Elyon or Elohim Elyon. Often we see Elyon by itself, such as in Psalm 91 that we read in the beginning, the shelter of the Most High, Elyon. And we know the Most High refers to God, expressing the extreme sovereignty and majesty of God and his highest preeminence. We will conclude by praising God with a hymn written by Isaac Watts in the 18th century. Give thanks to God Most High. Pay attention to all that God had done in creation and through history, because he is El Elyon, God Most High. Dan Stook shall lead us. For benediction, listen to God's words to his people from Psalm 50. Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and perform your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. The words of God. Thanks be to God.